The flash from someone's iPhone camera caught me mid-laugh. I blinked, then forced a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Rehearsal dinners are supposed to feel warm, like a thank you hug wrapped in food and too many toasts. This one felt curated, performative. I was seated 3 spots away from Lily, my stepdaughter, the bride-to-be. At the head of the table, Susan, her mother, my wife, or whatever the hell she was at this point, and 2 empty chairs waiting for the photographer and the planner. But we all knew those were placeholders for someone who never showed. That someone being Lily's biological dad. I paid for the damn table layout, and yet somehow, I wasn't even part of the narrative. Everyone kept thanking Susan for the venue, the dress, the cake. She'd nod politely like a politician accepting credit for rain. And when someone raised a glass, to Lily and the family that made this happen, guess who they all looked at? Not me. 12 years. I taught that girl how to parallel park in a blizzard, sat with her through her first breakup, paid for violin lessons she dropped after 3 weeks. When her dog died, it was my lap she cried into, not Susan's, certainly not her biological father's, but somehow, now that the wedding was here, my name had gone missing, or maybe it was never engraved anywhere in the first place. Susan kept introducing me as Mark, just Mark, not my husband, not Lily's stepfather, just Mark, like a vendor, like I catered the salmon and decided to linger. I tried to brush it off. I even chuckled when someone mistook me for the wedding coordinator, but there was a moment, tiny but sharp, when Lily clinked her glass to get attention and thanked everyone who made today possible. She listed the planner, the florist, her mom, her aunt, her bridesmaids, the dog even, not a word about me, and I didn't say a thing. Why? Because I believed there was still time, still tomorrow, the walk down the aisle. Maybe she'd say something then. Maybe I'd still be allowed to mean something. It's a strange kind of pain, being erased in plain sight. If you've ever held a family together with duct tape and wallet receipts, you'll understand. Most people walk away when they feel unappreciated. I stayed, I built, I funded, I believed. And if you're still reading, if any part of this has your blood simmering, I need to ask a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button. More than 97% of you are listening without subscribing. And believe it or not, that small click motivates our team to keep creating these stories that punch you in the gut and don't let go. All right, back to it. The toast ended. The laughter resumed. A waiter cleared the plates. I stayed behind at the table, tracing the ring of condensation left by my untouched drink. Susan leaned over and whispered, "You don't need to hang back, honey. The real photos happen tomorrow." And just like that, there it was again. Real, the real photos, the real father, the real family. I stood up and nodded politely, walked out of the tent, past the string lights and perfect hydrangeas. The air was heavy with humidity and just enough regret to choke on. I didn't say a word that night, but something inside me, quiet and steel-edged, shifted. Not anger, not even sadness, just a clean break. And the sound it made? Silence. The tie wouldn't sit right. I'd redone the knot 3 times already. Double Windsor, then a Pratt, then back to a single loop. None of them looked right. It wasn't nerves. I don't do nerves. I've given eulogies, run boardrooms, testified under pressure. But this morning, in the small guest room Susan said I could use to get ready, my hands trembled. Maybe it was the mirror, that lighting, or maybe I already knew something was wrong. I was adjusting my cufflinks when I heard it, her voice muffled through the cracked door, Susan pacing the hallway on the phone with her sister. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when you hear your name in a hushed tone just hours before a wedding you paid for, your ears sharpen whether you want them to or not. She wanted her real dad to walk her down the aisle, Susan said, pausing just long enough to twist the knife. But he couldn't make it, so Mark will do. Will do, like a last-minute replacement, like the cheap folding chair you pull from the garage when someone unexpected shows up at Thanksgiving. My hand stopped mid-adjustment. I stared at my reflection, watching my face drain a little, eyes narrowed, jaw tight, not quite angry yet, just undone. She never told me Lily invited her biological father, not once in the months of planning, budgeting, menu tasting, and trying to track down gluten-free cake options. She'd never said a word. And now I learn, accidentally, that the only reason I'm walking her down the aisle is because the man who left when she was 4 didn't bother showing. Will do. That's what I'd been reduced to. A stand-in, a prop in a tailored suit. Susan's voice dropped again. No, he didn't even call. Just ghosted. I told Lily it's for the best. But she cried all night. Yeah, she still misses him. I should have stepped out then, should have cleared my throat, slammed the door, let her know I heard every syllable. But I didn't. I stood frozen, one cufflink in, one dangling from my fingers, suddenly unsure of whether I was part of this family or just its longest unpaid contractor. 12 years. That's how long I spent patching holes left by a man too selfish to stay. Birthday parties, science fair projects, orthodontist bills, late-night car trouble, me. I was the one who showed up. I was the one who stayed. And now I'm learning I was never even considered the first choice. That's when it hit me, not just the betrayal, but the pattern, the casual erasures, the public introductions with no label, the missed thank yous, the invisible man at the family table. It didn't start at the rehearsal dinner. That was just the first time I let myself notice. I slipped on my jacket in silence. The fabric felt heavier than usual, like it knew it was about to carry a man no one wanted to acknowledge unless a bill needed paying. Outside the door, Susan kept talking. No, Mark doesn't know. Why stir the pot, right? We just need him to get her down the aisle. After that, he can disappear. That last sentence didn't sting. It calcified something. You want me to disappear? All right, but not yet. Not before I make sure you remember exactly who held this whole show together. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. Susan turned mid-sentence, startled. I smiled. Not wide, not warm, just enough to make her wonder how much I'd heard. Morning, I said. Everything on schedule? She blinked. Yes, of course. Everything's perfect. I nodded, buttoned my jacket, and walked past her toward the main room. Perfect, sure. Let's make today perfect. But you'll regret not letting me be real, because soon you're going to wish I'd stayed imaginary. The music swelled, the kind of string quartet arrangement that was supposed to make grown men tear up and mothers dab at their cheeks. Rows of pastel dresses and stiff tuxedos shifted in unison as everyone stood. Cameras rose, phones tilted, 100 curated smiles turned toward the back of the aisle. Lily, dressed in white, stood beside me. Her arm trembled slightly in mine, not with fear, excitement probably, or maybe nerves about the dress. She looked breathtaking. I'd spent months making sure she could wear whatever she wanted, down to the imported lace and hand-stitched hem. And yet, as I looked at her profile, her chin lifted, eyes focused forward, I realized she hadn't once turned to me since we stood there. Not one glance. The planner made a little gesture. It was time. I took a breath and stepped forward with Lily on my arm. One step, two. I could feel the collective warmth of the guests washing over us. Laughter from a cousin, a sniffle from someone in the second row. They all looked like they were watching a fairy tale, but something about it felt fake, like the glossy finish on cheap wood. Susan stood up in the front row, all dolled up in her champagne-colored gown, smiling like she was posing for a magazine cover. As I walked past her, she leaned slightly toward Lily, the kind of practiced movement that photographers love to catch, mother sharing a word with daughter in the moment. But I heard her. He's just the stepdad. Let him have his moment. Smiled through her teeth, like it was a punchline, like she was giving a man on hospice one last ice cream cone before the end. And Lily didn't flinch, didn't look over at me, didn't say, "Mom, don't," didn't whisper, "He's done everything for me." Nothing. She kept walking. She let it land. We reached the altar. The officiant smiled and nodded. I took Lily's hand and placed it into the groom's as rehearsed. She gave him a look I hadn't seen in years, soft, complete. She mouthed hi and giggled. My cue was done. I turned to walk away, but just before I did, I paused. I waited for her to at least glance back, to mouth a thank you, to squeeze my hand. She didn't. The groom pulled her closer. The photographer signaled to the officiant. The moment moved on without me. I sat down in the front row next to Susan. She leaned in and whispered, "You did great." I didn't reply. My hands were clasped too tightly in my lap to speak. My fingers were stiff, my mouth dry. They didn't see it. None of them did. They thought they were watching a sweet, symbolic walk. But what they really witnessed was a man realizing in real time that he'd never been part of the story. Just a footnote, a budget line. He's just the stepdad. That line didn't come out of nowhere. It had been rehearsed, spoken in living rooms behind closed doors, in phone calls with family, in bridal consultations where I wasn't invited. It wasn't a slip. It was a summary. My ears rang through the vows. I didn't hear much after that, just static. Just the dull echo of a man's value being weighed and discarded in front of everyone. When they kissed, the room erupted into applause. Susan stood again to clap, turning toward the guests like a queen hosting a gala. I clapped too, but not for them. I clapped because I finally saw it clearly. The whole picture. And when a man sees the truth that sharply, there's only one thing left to do. Make sure they remember who paid for the frame. Her arm was light in mine, not hesitant, just distant, like she was walking with a stranger she trusted to stay in step. Lily didn't lean on me like she used to in the mall when her feet got tired. She didn't squeeze my elbow like she did during our high school graduation. That small gesture we used to share, the one that meant thank you without words, was gone, replaced by a posture too straight, too posed, like we were both actors on cue. The aisle stretched longer than I remembered, longer than it looked in the photos and diagrams and Pinterest mock-ups Susan obsessed over. The music, the soft string quartet piece Lily picked herself, was the only sound threading us through a forest of cell phones and polite smiles. Every few steps a flash went off, and every time it did, that phrase echoed behind my eyes. He's just the stepdad. I tried to focus on Lily. Her hair curled in soft waves. The lace on her gown caught the light perfectly. Her bouquet, white peonies and pale roses, looked exactly like she wanted. And still, she didn't look at me, not once. The weight of her hand on my arm felt symbolic, like the final paycheck after a layoff. Appreciated, sure, but impersonal. I thought of her 8th birthday, the first one after her dad stopped calling. I took her to the zoo and bought her a stuffed lion she clung to for weeks. I thought of all the nights I sat on the floor with her, piecing together science projects while Susan disappeared into her wine. I thought of the driveway lessons, the recitals where she forgot her lines, the job interviews I prepped her for like she was walking into NASA. 12 years. And now I was being walked out of the story I helped write. When we reached the altar, I placed her hand into the groom's. He grinned. She smiled. Still no glance at me, no acknowledgement. The officiant nodded. I stepped back. I waited. Just a look, a flicker, a whispered, "Thank you." She turned slightly, not to me but toward the photographer, adjusting her bouquet and posture like they'd practiced. The shutter clicked, and in that moment, I wasn't her stepdad. I was scenery, background, someone they'd crop out of the album version. I stepped aside and sat. Every camera pointed forward now. I was behind them all, off stage. Susan leaned over again, all faux graciousness and lipstick. "She looks beautiful," she whispered. "She does," I replied, staring straight ahead. My voice didn't shake, it didn't crack, but something else did. Quietly, permanently. There's a specific kind of hollowness that settles in a man when he realizes he was never invited to stay, just tolerated until his usefulness expired. I told myself for years that biology didn't matter, that love, commitment, presence, those were what made a father. But now, with Lily glowing and grateful for everyone but me, I wondered if that had been my own private delusion. He's just the stepdad. It wasn't an insult anymore. It was a conclusion. And conclusions come with consequences. The reception was held under a massive white canopy draped in lights and money, my money. Edison bulbs strung like constellations, custom signage with Lily and her husband's names carved in wood, monogrammed napkins at every place setting. No detail was overlooked, except, apparently, me. I sat alone at the family table. Susan had orchestrated the seating chart, of course. Lily sat at the sweetheart table, radiating joy with her new husband, sipping champagne and laughing like a girl who just completed a project, not like someone who remembered who helped fund every chapter leading to that moment. The DJ announced, "And now, let's hear a few words from the mother of the bride." Applause. Susan stood, wine glass in hand, all regal grace and flawless timing. She tapped the glass gently and launched into a speech so polished it sounded rehearsed, which, knowing her, it was. "I want to thank everyone here today for supporting Lily's journey," she began, her voice rich with emotion. "It's taken a village, and although her real father couldn't be with us today, his spirit and love are here in everything you see." There it was, a beat, a moment, an opening. But instead of mentioning me, her actual day in, day out, there through every meltdown father figure, she pivoted. "Lily's real dad always wanted the best for her, and I know he's proud of who she's become." She continued, painting her ex-husband as a wistful, distant saint. The audience nodded along. Someone even dabbed their eyes. Not one word about the man who made this entire day possible. Not a syllable about the man who filled in every blank that her real dad left behind. She ended with a toast to enduring love, new beginnings, and the family who always believed in Lily. I waited. Still nothing. I stood slowly after the applause faded, making my way toward the mic. A few people noticed, even smiled at me like they were expecting a heartfelt follow-up. Maybe a story from her childhood, maybe a father's advice to the groom. I had one prepared. Spent the whole night before rehearsing it in front of the mirror, making sure my voice didn't crack when I got to the part about Lily coloring a card for me on Father's Day when she was 9, spelling it fatter in crayon. But as I approached, the DJ stepped in front of the mic with a sheepish look. "Oh, sorry, sir," he said. "We're a bit tight on time. The couple's asked we go straight to the cake cutting." I paused, blinking. "Just a few words. Won't take more than a minute." He shook his head apologetically, then leaned in. "Bride said no more speeches." My jaw locked. "Bride said," Lily said. So this wasn't an oversight. This wasn't about timing. This was planned. Someone had made sure I wouldn't speak, that I'd be kept silent like some embarrassing footnote they didn't want on record. Behind me, music faded in. Guests clapped as Lily and her groom rose to cut the cake. I stepped back, nearly bumping into a waiter with a tray of empty flutes. I stood there for a moment, just long enough to catch Lily's eyes as she raised the knife. She didn't blink, didn't wave, didn't even smile. She looked past me, and that's when I understood. They'd written me out of the script. The man who paid the bill didn't get a line, so I clapped again, slow, polite, almost admiring. And as I did, a thought settled in, clear and sharp. If they wanted to pretend I was never part of this family, then maybe it was time I started acting like it. The band had just started playing some generic pop cover, something about forever and dancing in the moonlight. Guests swayed politely, half drunk and wholly unaware. The caterers were cutting slices of cake, waiters refilling flutes with cheap sparkling wine pretending to be champagne, and I stood by the edge of the tent, watching the performance like a man observing his own wake. Susan laughed at something the groom's mother said. Her hand grazed the pearl neckline of her dress, feigning humility. Lily tossed her bouquet in slow motion for the cameras. All of it perfect, polished, paid for, by me. I slipped my hand inside my jacket. The check was folded in thirds, printed on ivory stock, the same kind Susan had insisted on for the invitations. $41,672.83, itemized, signed. I walked across the dance floor like a man walking through smoke, detached, quiet, invisible. No one even turned to look. Why would they? I wasn't part of the story, remember? I stopped in front of Susan. She was mid-sentence, something about the wine selection when I handed her the check. "For your records," I said. She took it, glanced down, frowning like I'd handed her a dry cleaning receipt. "What's this?" "The wedding," I said calmly. "Every cent, paid in full." She blinked. "Why are you giving me this now?" "Because it's yours now." Then I leaned in, just close enough that only she could hear me. "Wedding's off." Her eyes twitched, but the smile stayed on her lips. "What are you talking about?" she said, tone clipped. "They're already married, Mark." I nodded. "Yep. But the reception won't finish." She glanced at the check again, then at me, then over my shoulder toward the bar, the band, the waitstaff. Her breath caught. "What did you do?" "Nothing yet. Just thought we'd start keeping score properly." I stepped back, calm, neutral, not loud. I didn't storm off or flip a table. I wasn't there to create a scene. No, that part was over. This wasn't rage. It was inventory. And if anyone had been paying attention to my face, they would have seen it. That tiny curl in the corner of my mouth, not a smile exactly, more like the faint echo of one, the kind of expression a man wears when he's done hoping for recognition and starts removing scaffolding instead. Susan stood still, clutching the check like it might bite her. She started to say something, but I had already turned. A few guests noticed the exchange. One of the groom's cousins whispered something to his wife. The best man raised an eyebrow. Lily caught a glimpse of the movement and tilted her head in confusion. I gave her nothing, because that's what I was to her now, nothing, and I decided it was time to return the favor. The music continued, the lights twinkled, and the reception carried on, for now. But I knew something none of them did. This entire show, this borrowed fantasy, was balanced on one thing, me. And I had just started walking away. Susan's morning began with a mimosa and a headache. Not the metaphorical kind. She drank too much wine the night before and barely touched the dry chicken she raved about during the tasting. Still wearing her silk robe and smug satisfaction, she lounged on the patio chair behind the house, scrolling through Instagram posts from the wedding guests, photos, videos, #Lily and Ben forever trending among their circle. She was still smiling at a slow-mo boomerang of Lily tossing the bouquet when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She ignored it. 2 minutes later, another. "Hi, this is Marcy from Empress Floral. We had a note that the payment on file for yesterday's event has been rescinded. Can you provide alternate billing? Susan squinted. What? I'm sorry, the woman repeated, tone now cautious. The account used to secure your order was revoked this morning. We've been notified by the processing service. The arrangement invoices are now pending. Susan blinked. I'm not following. What do you mean revoked? Another call came through. She silenced the florist. This time it was the catering company. We're getting notifications that the card on file has been closed. Our balance for service hasn't been cleared. Just wanted to confirm this wasn't a mistake on our end. Susan stood slowly, the mimosa still in her hand but untouched. She walked inside and sat at the kitchen table, now staring at her phone like it had turned into a snake. Buzz. The venue. Hi Susan, it's Heather. I hate to bring this up, but we received a reversal notice this morning. Your booking is now marked unpaid. We'll need resolution on this immediately or we'll initiate the collection process. That word, collection, made her stomach flip. She clicked open her email. 17 unread messages, all some variation of payment source invalid, billing voided, contract breach due to non-payment. She tried calling Mark, straight to voicemail, tried texting him. What's going on? No response. Then she opened the folder labeled Wedding Docs on her laptop, the one Lily had barely touched. Vendor contracts, event insurance, catering invoices, music, photography, decorations. Every contract was in Mark's name, every signature, every point of contact, every email listed. Not one was under Susan, not even Lily, not even for the damn photo booth. Susan's eyes darted across the screen, panic rising. She opened the contract for the gown. Mark, the hotel suite, Mark, the string quartet, Mark. The realization landed with a sick thud. He hadn't just paid for the wedding, he owned it, and now he was undoing it, transaction by transaction, legally, cleanly, quietly. There were no backups, no alternate cards on file, no family willing to front tens of thousands of dollars in a single morning. She heard Lily coming down the stairs, humming, still in her robe, hair undone. Morning, Lily said, smiling. Some night, huh? Susan didn't answer. Lily poured herself coffee, oblivious, until she noticed her mother's face. What's wrong? Susan's voice came out hollow. Everything's being canceled. Lily laughed. What? The vendors, the venue, the contracts, Mark's canceling everything. Lily's face dropped. But we're married. It's done. No, Susan whispered, staring at her screen like it might bite her. He's done. And for the first time, Lily looked unsure. Because up until now, Mark had been the safety net no one ever acknowledged. And now they were standing on nothing but assumptions. Lily called me 5 times before breakfast. I didn't answer. By the 6th, she left a voicemail that started confident, cracked halfway through, and ended in silence. I could imagine her pacing, phone in hand, that perfect composure she inherited from her mother beginning to fray. I let it ring again. Still no answer. Meanwhile, Susan was discovering the financial aftershocks in real time. At 10:07 a.m., her credit card was declined at the hotel where she'd booked the honeymoon suite as a surprise gift for the newlyweds. The front desk clerk, polite but unmoved, repeated the line that would follow her the rest of the day. I'm sorry, ma'am. The payment source is no longer active. She tried another card, declined. Then another, same result. Her voice rose. That's impossible. There's a shared account for this. And there was an account I opened years ago when Susan wanted freedom to manage family expenses. She never realized that shared didn't mean joint. She had access, not ownership. She could spend what I allowed, and when I closed it, legally, instantly, it was like turning off the oxygen. Lily's morning wasn't much better. Her dressmaker texted, "Need confirmation on final payment before we release the gown. Balance outstanding." Lily replied, "It was paid weeks ago." The dressmaker sent back a screenshot of the reversal notice. Payment source recalled. Then the florist, then the photographer, then the rental company asking for their chairs back. Each message landed like a drip from a leaking ceiling. Slow, relentless. By noon, Susan was on her laptop surrounded by invoices, calling banks, snapping at customer service reps, trying to sound composed but unraveling by degrees. Her makeup from the night before smudged slightly at the corners of her eyes. She hadn't even noticed. This is a mistake, she said into the phone for the 3rd time that hour. There's been a mix-up. My husband must have... She stopped mid-sentence. The woman on the other end didn't respond. Not my husband anymore, huh? Lily stood nearby, scrolling through her phone, firing off texts that grew shorter and sharper. Mark, please answer. Mom's freaking out. Did something happen? You can't just. But I could. I was somewhere quiet by then, sipping black coffee, watching the first real cracks appear in the illusion they'd built. I wasn't cruel about it, just patient. They'd spent years mistaking my presence for permanence, assuming stability was a natural resource, not a choice. Susan tried one last card at the hotel, tapping it twice on the reader. Declined again. The front desk attendant gave a sympathetic smile. Maybe contact your bank? Lily muttered something about how could he do this, and it's not fair. And there it was, the line every entitled person falls back on when the world stops revolving around them. Not fair. No, it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair when I paid every tuition bill and got called Mark instead of Dad. It wasn't fair when I worked double shifts to afford that wedding and got erased from the toast. It wasn't fair when Susan stood there, wine glass in hand, and praised the ghost of a man who hadn't sent a birthday card in 20 years. So no, fair had left the building long before I did. By 3 p.m., Susan's phone was on silent. She couldn't take another call. Lily was sitting at the kitchen table in her robe, scrolling through wedding photos that now looked less like memories and more like evidence. Everything beautiful about yesterday had one common denominator, me, and now that I was gone, so was it all. The knock came just after sunset, 3 firm raps that startled both of them. Susan froze halfway down the stairs, wine glass still in hand, the stem trembling slightly. Lily looked up from the couch, her phone lighting her face, streaked with the faint salt of dried tears. For a second, neither moved. Then Susan, forcing composure, called out, "Who is it?" "Courier," came the muffled reply. She opened the door to a man in a gray jacket holding an envelope. No expression, no explanation, just a clipboard and a signature line. She signed without asking what it was, maybe out of habit, because all her life people handed her things and she assumed they were good. When the door shut, she stood there staring at the envelope like it might burn through her hand. Her name was printed cleanly across the front, nothing else. No return address, no logo. Inside, 2 sheets of heavy paper. The first was typed, formal. Mrs. Susan Keller, this letter serves as official notice that effective immediately. All forms of financial, logistical, and emotional support previously provided by Mr. Mark Ellison are hereby terminated. Her throat tightened. She scanned faster. As there is no legal marriage binding you and Mr. Ellison, and as Miss Lillian Parker is not a legal dependent of Mr. Ellison, no continuing obligation, fiduciary or otherwise, exists. Mr. Ellison has lawfully withdrawn from all agreements, accounts, and shared holdings as of this date. Susan's eyes darted to the bottom, to the single paragraph that stung worse than any financial hit. All contractual ties have been settled. No further contact will be initiated or entertained. Below that, a single line handwritten in blue ink. Maybe your real dad can finish what I started. Her hands trembled. The page slipped, brushing the tile. Lily crossed the room, barefoot, picking it up before her mother could. She read silently, mouth parting as the meaning registered. What does this mean? Susan didn't answer. Lily reread the line, voice breaking. What does he mean, no legal marriage? You and Mark. Just drop it, Susan snapped, voice sharp but thin. No, Mom, what does he mean? Susan's lips pressed together. We never finalized it, she said finally, so quiet it barely carried. The paperwork was delayed. We meant to, but it didn't matter. We were together. Lily blinked, disbelief cutting through. You're saying you're not even… Stop! The sound echoed, then silence again, heavy. Lily's phone buzzed, another unpaid invoice. She ignored it. Outside, the sun dipped low enough that the living room dimmed, the only light coming from the chandelier Mark had installed himself 2 years ago. He'd written one line, just one, and it undid everything. Not through yelling, not through revenge, not even through exposure, just truth delivered in ink. Susan's chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. She picked up the papers again, flipping through them, hoping to find something, some clause, some loophole, anything that hinted at a way back. There wasn't one. Mark hadn't left a mess. He'd left finality. Lily sat down slowly on the bottom stair, the paper still dangling from her fingers. He really meant it, she whispered. He's gone. Susan didn't answer. She couldn't, because for the first time in 12 years, there was nothing left to argue, to manipulate, or to lean on. Just silence. The kind that filled every corner of the house he once paid for, every room he once warmed with the quiet decency they mistook for weakness. And that silence, his silence, was the loudest thing either of them had ever heard. The next morning, they returned to the venue, because denial always arrives dressed as hope. Lily still wore her dress. She refused to change, refused to acknowledge that something permanent had fractured. The hem, once pristine, now bore a faint line of dirt from pacing the kitchen floor all night. Her hair had been recurled by a friend who just knew everything would work out, and Susan rode in the passenger seat clutching her phone like it might spontaneously offer redemption. When they pulled up, the parking lot was almost empty. No valet, no floral arch out front. The white welcome sign with the couple's names had been removed, leaving 2 zip ties dangling from the frame. A lone seagull screamed overhead. Lily got out first, confusion quickly fading into dread. "Where is everyone?" Inside, the cavernous hall felt too big, echoes bouncing off empty tables, no linens, no centerpieces. The chairs had been stacked against the wall. The stage where the band had set up the night before was bare, power cords still coiled neatly, untouched. A woman in a clipboard and headset approached, the coordinator. She glanced up from her phone, startled to see them. "You're back?" "Yes," Susan said, voice brittle. "Why wouldn't we be?" The coordinator checked her iPad. "I assumed you got the cancellation notice this morning. We sent it around 7. When payment was withdrawn, our policies required we halt remaining services." Lily stepped forward. "But the wedding already happened." The coordinator shrugged. "A ceremony isn't a contract. What happens afterward, reception, venue use, photos, food, lodging, that's all tied to fulfillment. No payment, no wedding." Susan opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her hand trembled slightly. "We'll settle it now." She pulled out a credit card. The coordinator didn't even take it. "That card's already been declined 3 times, she said quietly. From behind them, the officiant walked in, already folding up his ceremony binder. "I waited half an hour," he said gently. "Thought maybe it was just a misunderstanding. But I've got another event across town. I need to head out." He nodded to Lily. "You looked beautiful, by the way." Then he was gone. Guests began arriving, one by one at first, then in clusters, smiling, dressed up, some holding gifts. Then slowly the expressions changed. Whispers passed between couples. Phones were pulled out. Texts compared. One man gestured toward the silent room and asked, "Is this the right place?" The silence deepened. It stretched across the hardwood floors and climbed up the rafters. No music played. The string quartet, never paid in full, hadn't even shown. There was no food, no cake, no bartender, no photos being taken now. Lily stood in the center of the empty room, veil catching the morning light, arms hanging loosely at her sides. Around her, everything disassembled. Susan walked over to one of the stacked chairs and sat heavily. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She simply stared at the same spot on the floor where Mark had stood the night before, check in hand, voice calm. "Wedding's off." She hadn't understood what he meant then. Now she did. And Lily, finally turning in place, finally facing the weight of it all, looked at the altar. Just wood and fabric now. No flowers, no priest, no one. Just a space, a hollow, an absence too loud to ignore. She had stood next to the one man who showed up for her again and again, and she let her mother reduce him with 5 words. "He's just the stepdad." And now, there was no music, no cheers, no slow dance, just the echo of that sentence, rattling in the ruins. He was just the stepdad, the man who paid, the man who stayed, the man who walked away so cleanly they didn't notice he was carrying the whole damn thing.